What's going on, guys? Back with another one. So once again, I'm going to talk about Tristan Tate and his defense of, in this case, I guess, brown people, which kind of implies mixed people, but other groups as well can be kind of thrown in that. That's why this whole, POC, title, people of color, it's not really fitting because it's too broad. Same thing with BIPOC, POC, which is Black, Indigenous, people of color. It's too broad. It means, it can mean anything. It basically just means non-white. In the case of Tristan Tate, he is mostly white. Like I said, technically we could say he's a quadroon, but he doesn't use that title. He just calls himself mixed race because he's European raised, and the phrasing mixed race is more commonly used there. In America is similar, but also America people will say biracial, stuff like that. So neither here or there. He often does speak up for mixed race people, like I said, because he identifies as mixed race. And so that's why I appreciate him. And I'll definitely, highlight that when he does. So in this case, let's check it out. The initial tweet that I saw over on X, or I guess it's called a post now, not a tweet, but the guy puts here, brown people have no honor. Such a bold statement. And it's probably not a black person, right? Because, a lot of blacks, they're going to claim all the browns is they're part of our group, right? So I'm guessing this is going to be a pale person, okay? A pasty pale person or a white person that's putting this comment, brown people have no honor. It's like, what brown people are you talking about? This is kind of this is 6 days ago. This is all the riffraff that's going on with the Indians and the Anglos. When I say Indian, not the Native Americans, talking about the Indians from East India, South Asia, right? There's a lot of riffraff going on in the blogosphere on X, and with Elon Musk's defense of the H-1B visas and Vivek Ramaswamy, who's another important central figure in that whole debate, and the whole MAGA crowd, the MAGA Republicans in Trump's camp, who are nativist populists, who are like anti-immigration in the United States. Very interesting development, even this whole past week with this whole, MAGA implosion, right? And very interesting stuff. I can't wait to see more of this. But so we know the guy here, basically where he kind of stands on this, right? He says, brown people have no honor. You can only trust European and some Asian cultures to not steal your belongings. He's saying Asian cultures. He's talking about East Asian. He's talking about, because a lot of these type of like Anglo purists and white nationalists, they really admire the homogeneity of like the Japanese culture. You notice that with a lot of white supremacists, they really admire like Japan. We even know that even there was a time they were allies. Japan was an ally to the Nazi party. And we see even with other prominent kind of white nationalists like Jared Taylor, I believe he's fluent in Japanese. He's probably lived in Japan and taught in Japan. So there's kind of a cross connection there. And there has been for almost, like I say, 100 years now with some of these white nationalist Anglos and their admiration for the Japanese and their society. So when they look at allies, they're looking to the East. They're looking to them, the Japanese. So that's when he says some Asian cultures, some. He's not saying all of you, saying some, but he doesn't specify. I know, because I'm half Anglo. I know what he's talking about. And he says, third world culture revolves around scamming and lying. And, there's some truth to that. I cannot disagree with that statement. He says third world culture revolves around scamming and lying. Now, there is kind of economic disparities, if I want to kind of, use liberal jargon to basically specify why they're scamming and lying. Because he says third world culture. That's very broad, just like his initial statement saying brown people. There's a bunch of different cultures and nationalities and languages that encompass quote unquote brown people. So like he says here, third world culture. Well, because you have third world culture in Asia, third world culture in South or Latin America, third world culture in Africa. These are all different racial groups, different languages, different cultures, right? So it's like they're not all the same. But like you said, he says third world culture revolves around scamming and lying. And like I said, I agree with the part where basically we have to understand that I've been to a couple third world countries, or what I like to say, a more politically correct term, developing nations. The reason why, because I don't want to talk down on countries that I want to visit or revisit. The people are nice. Like I'll use Ghana, for instance. They're not brown people, they're black people in Ghana. But there's like a couple brown people, but trust me, they stand out. They stick out. I stood out there. So if you're brown, if you're not dark skinned black, you're brown or whatever you are, you're going to stand out over there. And it's a third world nation, like I say, developing nation, Ghana, but there was a lot of scamming. That was the one takeaway that I did not like in that country, was the amount of scamming and lying, especially with like taxi drivers, how they would try to scam people and like overcharge. And that does happen in the United States and other countries too. That's why Uber kind of came in, but I didn't like that. And so we also know, even in West Africa, next to Ghana, their neighbor, Nigeria, they're well known around the world for scamming. And I was in the Dominican Republic. You will have people who will try to overcharge or scam and different. I can say that about any other country too. I'm just referencing the countries I've been to thus far. So what I'm saying is that there is an economic kind of underlying issue there, to why some of the people, the inhabitants, they have to kind of position themselves to scam people. I'm not making an excuse for the scamming or criminality. I hate it. I don't like it. It's a big turn off. It makes me not want to even be around the scammers. But what I'm highlighting here is how the guy tries to like overgeneralize and just throw them all in the same third world culture revolves as like that elitist kind of talk. It's like, well, there's multiple cultures. It's not just a third world culture, so I don't agree with that. But yeah, there's a lot of scamming and lying going on, and it does need to be called out, as I have, and he does too, and I agree with that portion. Then he puts here the finishing statement: never trust a brown-oid to do the right thing. So it's all about like skin color. So we kind of know his angle. That's why I referenced him being pale. We kind of see his standpoint. It's too broad. Brown people, third world culture. You can trust some Asians, wink, wink, nod, nod, the pale ones who are from Japan, right? And he says, but never trust brownoids. So the language is very archaic and bizarre, very standoffish. And of course, it's kind of like a no-faced account, which is typical. Has a lot of engagement, though, we can see here. But then we have Tristan Tate, who jumped in. Tristan Tate, who says, this is quite ironic. Yes, it was the black man who sold his fellow blacks into slavery, yes. But today it's the white man who has sold out his own nations in return for money and power, exactly like Donald Trump and Elon Musk and the rest of them. Yeah, they sell out their fellow countrymen for power and influence, okay? And then he puts here, you whites in Europe. It's funny how Tristan Tate's saying, you whites in Europe. So he doesn't see himself as them, even though he's mostly white. Like I said, it's like 70% European genetics. His father's mulatto, Emery Tate, and his mom is white, British. So he's mostly white. He passes as white, but he identifies and sees himself as mixed race because, he's reality dose. Even living in Europe, maybe he understands. But even he talked about an encounter with Indian people that he, encountered, years ago. And he was saying the Indians looked at him as being white. And he was kind of like, well, I'm mixed race. But people, phenotypically, people perceived him to just be kind of a white guy. But he acknowledges and is standing in his truth. So that's interesting. But let's continue on with this. He puts here, yeah, you whites in Europe may be getting stabbed in front by immigrants, but only because you've been stabbed in the back by your fellow whites. Interesting. But see, they only want to jump. I mean, they don't only want to, but we see them the loudest jumping on the internet or even in person, crying and whining about the immigrants that took our jobs. They took our jobs. I want to be the one picking them strawberries and cleaning them toilets. They took our jobs, but they're not going to talk about the business owners and corporations who are making it easy for them, for these immigrants to work. They never talk about that. They just scapegoat these brown people, right? And they never even challenge, rarely ever, these white guys, okay, who are making it all happen. They kind of are now. And I do like to see that. That's why I'm seeing this whole MAGA implosion with Elon Musk and a lot of these white nationalists. They're over here, ruffling feathers and stirring stuff up on Twitter or X, because they see Elon is pro H-1B visas, wants to bring in all the Indians, to replace these whites. And a lot of the whites are pushing back. Your women betray you also as they flock to procreate with other races. And he knows that. Tristan Tate has firsthand knowledge because his mom's white, as mine is as well. And we see that. Yeah. And I frame it as is they're committing open mutiny because they're competing for power with their male counterparts. And we see that, and that's around the globe. Yeah, they're competing for power, political power, and influence in society. And the women outnumber the men of every culture and every race on the planet. So they have the numbers. It's funny how they're kind of framing themselves to be, minority and, women and minority, but yet they're the majority. But they're openly committing mutiny. That's how I phrase it, but competing with them for power. And that rarely gets talked about. They only talk about it because to them, the ultimate sin is if it's that white woman who gets with a black male. Then the white incels, then they start seething like crazy. But that's a big deal. That's why a lot of them are losing power. They want to blame the brown people, but your own damn women, are screwing you guys over. Let's continue on. We put here, and you all show no signs of stopping anytime soon. I hope you get your act together. I'd love to see a white Europe again. But you all seem to have a lot less honor than me and my brownoid friends and family. Yeah, a lot of them are not honorable today. And that's why people are losing fear and they're very bold because they see that there's no honor. It's just they want to revert back to their kind of primitive and tribalistic inclinations of barbarism, going back to those Anglo-Saxon Germanic tribalistic traditions of barbarism. They want to revert back to that. You look at the language initially, we look at that comment, brown people have no honor. You can only trust, European and some Asians, wink, wink, nod, nod, Japanese, who they kind of bombed and made them bend the knee and punked them, right? You can trust them. You can punk them and use violence to get them to submit to you. And then you can kind of trust them because you got them, And then he puts third world culture revolves around scamming, which, there's a lot of scamming. I agree with that portion. But third world culture, it's not just a broad culture. These are multiple cultures who have to resort to kind of sadly scamming to make a living, and then never trust a brownoid to do the right thing. See, that type of language is, like ultra divisive, and people can, point the finger at me as well. That's fair that I'm divisive with some of my language, but very broad and seems kind of barbaric and standoffish, if you ask me. Never trust a brownoid. That's like most of the planet is brown. You see, that's, and that's Asian. Most Asians are brown. And then you look at the indigenous populations, a lot of them are mixed in with Spanish and Portuguese. And then a lot of the Africans are mixing in with other groups, creating more people like me. And we're brown, baby. We're not, Tristan Tate's. That's why he's replying to this, because he's kind of within my camp, so to speak. Very interesting stuff. There's a lot more commentary and engagement in this post. I just wanted to highlight the first initial comment and then Tristan Tate's reply. I will put this whole kind of thread in the description box so you guys have access to it. But this is very interesting. It all revolves around the whole debate with the H-1B visas and how a lot of the kind of Anglo activists, I would say, are pushing back against this mass immigration that's not only occurring in Europe, but in North America. And Tristan Tate's pointing out the very, it's basically their own white people who are doing them in the lower class amongst their ranks. So they can scapegoat all the browns all they want, but it's their own people who are doing them in. What are your guys' thoughts on this? This is an interesting political discussion that we need to be engaged in. Talk to you guys next time.
I am the friend of